No one would buy her, abandoned without clothes in an alien market until a human took her in. Vareth's maw didn't welcome visitors. It swallowed them, gently with steam and rust. Beneath the methane domes and fractured light panels, the lowest market level pulsed like the inside of a dying animal. Pipes wept condensation. Fluorescent lanterns flickered with a sickly green hue. Meat vendors shouted over the hiss of steam, their voices echoing through the scaffolded corridors as scents of boiled fungus and burnt synth protein mixed with the smell of ozone and decay. Dr. Arlen Vine walked with his head slightly down, eyes scanning from under the brim of his coat. He moved like a man used to being hunted, or worse, remembered. The air itched, too thick, too chemical. But it was safer than the upper rings, where surveillance drones might still match his face to the archives. Down here, in the maw's gut, he was just another shadow with a name no one asked for. His destination was a bone vendor said to trade in outlawed dialect chips, specifically the extinct Thalari lineages. He hadn't heard one spoken in over a decade, and he hadn't expected to again. That changed when he passed a row of shattered crates near the waste vents. A voice behind him snorted. "Still here?" One of the vendors jeered. "No one wants that mute garbage? 3 failed bids. Rot claim for real." "Can't even scream," someone else said. "Bad stock." A wet laugh, a crunch, something thrown. Arlen glanced over, already preparing to forget whatever he'd see. But he didn't forget. She was crumpled in the corner like something discarded mid-use. Naked, blue-skinned, bruised, and grime-streaked. Hair long and tangled, though not black as he first assumed in the shadows, but deep crimson, soaked with oil and rain. She wasn't chained. They didn't need to. The law would claim her by the 3rd bell. No one had to touch her anymore. Time would do the rest. One thin arm wrapped across her chest, the other locked around her legs, holding her own ribs like a cage. She didn't flinch as the fruit core bounced near her hip. Didn't blink. Didn't move. He should have kept walking. He always did. He'd learned the cost of hesitation years ago. But something in her mouth made him stop. Her lips moved, barely. No sound. Arlen narrowed his eyes. It wasn't gibberish. It wasn't even language in the conventional sense. It was breath, measured and patterned, a rhythm, oral code. Each breath aligned with an invisible structure, like verse with no voice. He stepped closer. The mist around the waste vent swirled at his feet. A memory returned with it, unbidden. He'd once seen a child on the dying moons of Riss breathe herself to sleep reciting those same glyphs. Before the fires, before the silence. Now, here it was again. A dying girl exhaling the sacred breath of a civilization that had been erased. The Thalari. Their voices were meant to live only in memory, oral scripture, liturgical data encoded in rhythm and breath. No written text survived by design. It was said their gods only remembered what was spoken. And this girl was speaking to the gods. Arlen exhaled slowly. His heart drummed once, hard, then steady. He crouched, careful not to spook her. The vendor nearest him watched with disinterest. "You want her?" he sneered. "Go ahead. No one's paying rot fee to dump her. She's already got mold in her joints, mute and stripped, worth less than the coat on your back." Arlen said nothing. Instead, he reached behind his shoulder and slid his long coat off. The inside was lined with heat thread, old tech, but still good. He didn't drape it on her. He offered it gently, without touching her, laid it near her feet like a peace flag. Her eyes finally moved, slowly. Black irises rimmed in dark gold met his. She didn't thank him, but she didn't look away either. He lowered himself further until he was eye level, and spoke in a language that hadn't been legally recognized in over 2 centuries. "Peace," in Thalari. Her breathing hitched, just a fraction. But her pattern shifted, slightly, intentionally. She'd understood. A voice crackled over the overhead tannoy. "Sector sweeps begin at 3rd bell. All rot claim assets not tagged will be incinerated. Compliance is mandatory." Arlen stood and drew out his datapad. His fingers moved quickly across the cracked screen, activating the Cultural Archive interface, long obsolete but still legal under Treaty Protocol 17A, the ancient cultural preservation mandate. He turned to the vendor. "She's not rot claim. She's an oral archive." The vendor scoffed. "Don't quote ancient clauses at me, off-worlder. That law's dead." "Not while I'm alive," Arlen replied coldly. "I'm claiming her under interstellar preservation rights. She's a linguistic artifact, A Thalari oral codex. She's a naked half-dead girl with no name and no papers. Arlen tapped the air, projecting the mandate. The green hologram flickered, glitching, but held steady. "This is official," he said. "You interfere. It's obstruction of preservation law." The vendor stared at the projection, muttering under his breath. Across the market alley, a local enforcer turned but didn't approach. Arlen caught the hesitation in the man's posture. Some laws were buried, but not forgotten. "Take your salvage, archivist," the vendor spat. "She rots on your floor instead of mine." Arlen didn't respond. He turned back to her. She hadn't moved, just watched, waiting. He lowered his voice. "My name is Arlen. I won't hurt you. I won't ask you questions. But you have to come now, before the sweepers come." She blinked once, then again. He extended his hand, not toward her, but toward the coat. A moment passed. 2. Then slowly, she moved. Her hands closed around the fabric, pulling it to her shoulders, wrapping it tight across her body. When she stood, her knees wobbled, but she held. Barefoot, unsteady, glowing faintly blue under the misted market lights, she took one trembling step, then another. The vendor turned away. The enforcer watched without speaking. Together they walked through the steaming corridors, past flickering lights and broken signs. Her silent presence behind him felt fragile, like if he looked too fast, she might vanish. They climbed the creaking staircase to the surface levels. The maw rumbled around them, a constant mechanical growl beneath the steel skin of the world. He didn't speak. She didn't ask where they were going. In the silence, he glanced back. Her hair, long, red, tangled, caught a shaft of flickering neon light. It wasn't dull after all, just hidden under ash and neglect. He opened the door to his quarters, an old observation room above a forgotten bookstall. The walls hummed with recycled heat. A basin of warm water stood near a cracked mirror. Clean towels, simple clothes, a long tunic and soft-woven leggings folded neatly beside the sink. She paused at the threshold. "No one will touch you here," he said. No answer. But she stepped inside. He turned away to give her privacy, setting a ration packet on the counter, then moved to the corner and powered down the room's comlink array. Behind him, faint splashes, water hitting skin. A soft rustle as the coat dropped. He didn't look. When he finally turned back, she was crouched near the wall, wrapped in the tunic. Her eyes tracked his every movement, but her expression remained unreadable. He set a heat packet beside her without a word. Then, slowly, deliberately, he sat down across the room and took out his datapad. He tapped the screen and in Thalari glyphs, typed a single phrase. "You are not forgotten." She read it. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, but she shifted. A single breath, shallow, measured, controlled. The start of a verse. Her voice was still silent, but her name, he would learn it. And when she gave it, it would be hers again. The silence had changed, not vanished, just shifted. It no longer pressed against the walls like suffocating vapor. Instead, it settled gently, like dust over something long abandoned but finally still. 2 hours had passed since Arlen had brought her, Mira, into the small quarters above the bookstall. The door remained locked. The lights had dimmed automatically into night mode, bathing the room in faint amber. Outside, the low hum of Vareth's maw never ceased. Gears turned, pipes groaned. Somewhere, distant boots struck metal grates in regular rhythm. But in here, it was quiet. Mira sat near the far wall, half curled beneath the thermal wrap he'd given her. The tunic she wore hung awkwardly, too large in the sleeves, but her grip on the cloth had eased. Her crimson hair, damp when she emerged from the basin, had begun to dry in soft, irregular waves across her shoulders. Arlen watched her out of the corner of his eye, not with suspicion, but attention. She hadn't tried to run, hadn't asked for more. She hadn't spoken again since whispering her name. But she was still here. He was still learning how much that mattered. She hadn't eaten all the ration pack he'd left beside her. Half of it remained untouched, sealed. Some kind of instinct, maybe, or training. Don't take everything. Don't be seen as greedy. Leave no trace. She hadn't slept either, at least not fully. Every so often she blinked too slowly. Her breath would steady, body softening, but then a noise outside would jolt her awake again. Each time she'd glance toward the door, to him, to the shadows above the shelves. Arlen didn't speak, just adjusted his seat and turned back to the console's flickering screen. The Thalari glyphs shimmered across the old interface, reconstructed syllables coded from long-dead chants. He rubbed at his temple, then entered a new string of variables, adjusting the breath-rhythm interval on the 7th cadence. Wrong, still wrong. No matter how carefully he shaped the waveform, the cadence collapsed before the 3rd breath, because it had never been meant for text. His throat tightened. The Thalari didn't write. Their knowledge passed in breath, in rhythm, and space. Everything in their culture lived through the body, through voice. Memory was sacred. Memory was flesh. And now one of them, one who shouldn't exist, was here, hunched in his home, clutching his coat, silent but breathing the language of gods. He looked at her again. Mira hadn't moved, but her gaze had shifted to the console. Her eyes, black irises rimmed with gold, watched the glyphs on the screen with steady focus. Not curious, not amazed, familiar. He turned the console toward her slowly. She flinched barely, then narrowed her eyes. "You recognize this," he said. Still no answer. He tapped a line of breath code and played the loop. The console emitted a soft pulse, low, rhythmic, an imitation of the chant she'd mouthed earlier in the market. Her fingers twitched, not reaching, just reacting, like a trained muscle responding to old music. He waited. She didn't move. Instead, she exhaled through her nose, controlled, deliberate, then leaned forward just slightly and tapped the console once, then again. The first tap shifted the rhythm spacing. The second removed a glyph entirely. The adjustment was precise and completely correct. Arlen blinked once. "That's the proper morning interval," he murmured, "only used when reciting for the unborn." Her head turned slowly toward him. No response, but not denial either. "You're not just a carrier," he said. "You were taught formally." She looked away. Her silence said everything. Not denial, not confusion, just unwillingness to offer more. Arlen nodded to himself. "That knowledge is supposed to be extinct. The last oral keeper died before I was born." Still no answer. That's fine, he thought. The dead don't talk all at once. And neither do the grieving. He stood and moved to the shelf beside the old water basin. From it, he retrieved a second set of clothing, this one thinner, designed for sleep. He walked back and placed it nearby, but not close enough to pressure her. "You can wear these if you want. They're softer, easier to sleep in." She didn't move, but she didn't look away either. He backed off without comment and turned toward the mirror. The glass still held a faint layer of fog at its edges. Near the bottom, a smudge remained from where she'd traced her name earlier. Mira. The letters imperfect, but firm. He hadn't cleaned it. He wouldn't. When he turned back, she was standing. Slowly, legs stiff, knees hesitant, she crossed the room toward the new clothes. She didn't ask him to look away, didn't gesture, didn't speak. But her body stilled in that quiet, unreadable posture again. He understood. He walked to the far wall, turned his back, and waited. A soft rustle of fabric followed. The sound of old clothes being folded carefully and placed aside. He imagined her fingers smoothing the sleeves, not because she needed to, but because it gave her control. He didn't turn around until she cleared her throat. A dry, rasping sound, barely there. He turned. She was wrapped in the soft tunic and loose leggings, the hem brushing the tops of her bare feet. She sat back down near the console, arms folded under the wrap. Her posture wasn't relaxed, but it wasn't defensive either. He approached slowly and sat across from her. She stared at the glyphs still flickering faintly on the screen. He cleared his throat. "I don't record." She looked up. He clarified, "Anything. Ever. I write by hand. Always." From under the table, he pulled out a book. Not a datapad, not a console. A real, cloth-bound journal. Faded, dog-eared, ink-stained. He flipped to the latest page and set it down between them. "Do you want to add something?" he asked. She stared at it for a long moment, then reached. Her hand hovered over the page, just long enough to make him think she might stop. But she didn't. Instead, she began to write. The glyphs were older than his, more fluid, less rigidly spaced, the kind passed down mouth to mouth, breath to breath. Line after line flowed onto the page in near-perfect silence. When she finished, she slid it back to him and leaned back, eyes lowered. Arlen studied the text. A ritual, but not for mourning. A remembrance vow. A promise not to let a name fade from the air until the stars themselves died. He looked up, throat tight. "You kept the names," he said. "You remembered them all." She didn't nod, but her shoulders trembled, just once. "I failed to remember one," he said softly. I thought knowledge was enough. I thought if I translated it, it would be safe. But I didn't carry it the way you do. I didn't breathe it. She looked at him then. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, quiet, almost inaudible, she said, most of them didn't believe it mattered anymore, that no one would come, that silence would be all that's left. Arlen didn't respond, because he'd thought the same thing once. And now she was here, alive, still speaking, even if only in breath. When the lights dimmed further, signaling late night, he stood and offered her a folded blanket. This time she took it from his hands directly. He made his way to the corner of the room, lay down on the floor, and pulled a faded thermal pad over himself. Sleep if you want, he said. I'll be here. She didn't reply. But a few minutes later, her breath deepened, not relaxed, but real and steady. It was the closest thing to trust he'd seen in years. He lay awake a long time, staring at the glyphs on the ceiling, faded over decades, painted by hands long dead. Her name echoed in his mind, Mira. He would remember it, no matter what came next. When Arlen woke, the room was quiet in a way it hadn't been since Mira arrived. Not frozen, not watchful, just calm. He blinked up at the ceiling, its metal panels humming faintly with the maw's recycled energy flow. The light had shifted to soft gray, signaling morning through the artificial sky of the underground dome. He sat up slowly, his body protesting with the usual stiffness of a night spent on the floor. The old thermal pad beneath him had lost most of its heat. Mira was awake, sitting by the console with her knees drawn up. The blanket pooled around her like a quiet cocoon. Her crimson hair hung loose, slightly frizzed from drying in sleep. She hadn't touched the door, hadn't tried to escape. But something in her posture had changed. Not as tight, not as small. She turned as he moved, eyes steady but unreadable. "Did you sleep?" he asked, his voice gravel from the dry air. "A little," she said. Her voice had softened slightly, still rough but no longer raw. It wasn't trust yet, but it was no longer just survival either. Arlen nodded, standing to stretch his back. "There's tea." "Sort of." He crossed to the corner kitchenette, a repurposed shelf with a water coil, a mug, and a canister of dried herbs from a moon station he couldn't remember the name of. He activated the coil and waited as the water warmed, stealing a glance over his shoulder. Mira hadn't moved, but her eyes flicked to the screen again. "You can use the console," he offered. "I won't stop you." She didn't answer, but she reached toward the interface with her fingers, brushing the controls like they might break. A low hum responded as the console flickered to life beneath her touch. Arlen poured the water and brought her a mug without a word. She didn't reach for it immediately, but the scent pulled her in, something warm, bitter, not pleasant but real. She took it from him after a moment's hesitation, her hands wrapping around the ceramic as if testing its weight. "I fixed the interval you marked last night," he said, settling across from her. "The phrasing works now better than my last 7 attempts." She blinked once, then nodded. Still no praise, just acknowledgement. That was fine. He hadn't earned more. "You're not just reciting the rites," he added. "You're reconstructing them." This time she looked at him directly. "They were passed down, mother to daughter, by breath. Even after the burnings?" She nodded. "How did you survive?" That made her go still, too direct. Arlen didn't press. Instead, he leaned back, sipping from his own mug, letting the silence settle again. He watched the steam rise, thin ribbons of heat catching the light from the window vent. Finally, she said, "I didn't. Not in the way they wanted." It wasn't an answer, but it was a beginning. By midday, she was reading aloud. Not fully. Her voice came in fragments, hoarse syllables shaped by caution. But the words were there. Arlen sat back and let her recite, only offering corrections when she paused. She moved slowly through the texts, sometimes stopping to edit a glyph with her finger, sometimes whispering a correction he hadn't seen. The language moved through her like breath through an instrument, measured, sacred, alive. When she tired, he handed her another mug of broth. She drank it in small sips, eyes closed, like she was memorizing the taste. "You're a historian," she said quietly. Arlen looked up. "I was. Now? Now I survive. I trade scripts, transcribe forgotten dialects for smugglers who don't care what they mean. Sometimes I teach street kids how to write their names in 3 alphabets so they don't get labeled as illiterate waste." Mira stared at him a long moment. "And me?" He exhaled. I don't know yet. Silence again. But this one stretched too long. She stood suddenly and walked to the mirror. Arlen didn't follow. He just watched. She stared at her reflection, the fogged surface still etched faintly with her name. Mira. Below it, she began drawing new glyphs, slower this time, intentional. When he finally approached, she stepped aside. The markings were different from the ones she'd written the night before. "These aren't Thalari," he said. "No," she replied. "They're older." "Proto-script?" "Before Proto. My mother called it First Skin." He stared. "I thought that system was myth." "So did the ones who destroyed it." Her voice didn't shake. She said it with the precision of someone who'd long buried grief under discipline. "You're more than a memory keeper," he said softly. "I'm the last one who knows the first breath," she answered. Neither of them spoke for a while after that. Evening came in soft pulses of amber light filtering through the ceiling grids. Arlen boiled another ration and split it into 2 bowls. Mira accepted hers without comment. She didn't devour it this time. She ate slow, careful, chewing each bite like it was something she might need to explain later. As they sat across from each other, her posture slowly uncurled. "I heard your name once," she said. He looked up. "In the outer stations. They said you vanished after refusing to build a neural syntax tool." Arlen's stomach tensed. "I refused to design language for subjugation," he said quietly. "They wanted something that could override thought through embedded grammar. If I'd completed it, they could have planted obedience in speech itself." "And you walked away?" "No," he said. "I was exiled, branded a liability. My name's worth less than a counterfeit passport now." Mira looked down at her hands. "Then why do you still carry it?" He hesitated. "Because it's mine. I earned it by surviving what they made me do. I keep it so I remember not to become that again." She didn't answer right away. Then softly she said, "I kept mine in silence, buried in breath." "That's still keeping it," he said. "That's still resistance." They sat in silence again, but now it felt like something shared rather than imposed. That night, she didn't return to the far wall. Instead, she sat beside the console as he wrote in the journal, her knees tucked beneath her, shoulder resting lightly against the edge of the table. She didn't speak, but she didn't flinch when he stood, didn't freeze when he passed close. When he laid out the thermal blanket on the floor, she stepped over and settled down beside it, not touching, but near, a kind of nearness that wasn't survival anymore. It was choice. Arlen turned off the lights and lay back. Mira shifted, drawing the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Before sleep claimed them both, she spoke once more. "You said you failed someone." "I did," he whispered. "I didn't speak for her, when it mattered. You did this time." He didn't know what to say to that, but he didn't have to, because she'd chosen to stay. And that, more than language, more than breath, was the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. But it was alive, and it was growing. It had started with a scent, faint, feral, familiar. Mira had frozen mid-sentence as it drifted from the hallway vent, burned incense and copper, the kind used during Thalari funerals. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble, but her silence shifted, deeper, heavier. Arlen noticed immediately. He didn't speak. Just closed the console and waited. After several breaths, she said, "They used to burn that after executions." Arlen nodded slowly. "They're trying to intimidate you." "No," she murmured. "They're trying to remind me who they think I am." She turned to him then, not with fear but with resolve. "You said once you failed someone." He hesitated, then motioned toward the floor between them. "Sit, I'll tell you." She sat cross-legged, no defenses, no distance. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, voice steady but low. "My sister's name was Lyra, 2 years older. We grew up in an orbital colony outside the core, one of those sterile education habitats where everyone's a prodigy by 12 or forgotten by 13. Lyra was unforgettable." He paused, exhaling. "She built languages like other kids built puzzles, complex structures, fluid systems. She didn't learn speech. She dissected it, lived in it. She believed language could prevent war." Mira tilted her head. "That belief got her killed?" "No," Arlen said. "My silence did." She waited. "I joined the Xenolinguistic Institute when I turned 17. She was already a star there. I was the shadow. Then the military arrived. They wanted a new kind of communication tech, Language as a weapon. They called it subjugation syntax. Commands buried in grammar, programming obedience through sentence structure. Mira's breath hitched. Spoken mind control. Yes, they used something like that on the border moons. Some of my people began reciting trade cant, then forgot the old breath lines entirely, as if something had been erased. They were, Arlen said, jaw tight, and my sister helped build the prototype. Or, they made her help. He looked down at his hands, clenched. When I saw the alpha strings, I recognized her voice patterns embedded in the cadence. Her syllable weight, her signature breath breaks. Did she survive? They said she left, but I don't believe them. Not when I heard her voice inside a weapon. The silence that followed was unlike the others they'd shared. This one wasn't hollow. It was full of guilt, memory, and something raw neither of them knew how to name. Mira finally spoke. My mother taught me the rites in secret, not just the common ones, the origin codex. First breath theory. She said it was older than stars, that it lived in the body, not the mind. That memory through breath could never be rewritten. Arlen nodded slowly. That's why they hunted your people, not for religion, not even for resistance, but because you carried a language they couldn't replicate, something that couldn't be broken down or bought. Mira's eyes flicked to the console. They tried. The collector who bought me, he had machines, neural extractors, voice recorders. Every night he'd play back what he'd pulled from others, begging, prayers, parts of the rites, trying to trick me into correcting them. Her voice trembled just once. I didn't speak, not even once. And he gave up? He said I was bad stock, not worth the energy. I was left to rot. That's when you found me. Arlen's throat tightened. I almost walked past you, but you didn't. He looked at her then, not as an artifact, not as a survivor, but as the one who endured when everyone else was erased. I thought helping you might make up for failing Lyra, he admitted. But now I see that was selfish. No, she said. It was honest. A small, still moment passed between them, neither confession nor absolution, just recognition. Then a soft chime pinged from the console. Arlen checked the display. His face changed. What is it? Mira asked. A perimeter scan. Someone's on the stairs. She was already standing. Arlen moved quickly to the hidden hatch behind the supply rack. We're going out the back. Mira's voice was level. Is it them? Corporate. I'd bet everything. And if it is, they're not here to talk. He grabbed the journal, the breath crystal, and a ration pack. Mira retrieved her satchel. No panic, no questions, only readiness. They slipped through the vent corridor into the maintenance duct network. Pipes hissed with recycled vapor. Walls flickered with faulty power relays. Arlen guided them silently, counting steps by instinct. They'd done this before, too many times. But halfway up the northern shaft, Mira stopped. She turned, breath sharp. Wait. Arlen stopped too. What? She reached into her cloak and pulled out a narrow strip of fabric. A band, deep blue, with a spiral of gold thread etched into its surface. My mother gave this to me, she said. The spiral represents the first breath, the beginning of all memory. Arlen frowned. Why now? Because if we get separated, you'll carry it. He stared at her. I won't leave you. I know, she said gently. But memory has to survive, even if we don't. He took the band from her hands. It was still warm. He tied it around his wrist, tight, firm, deliberate. I'll protect it, he said. I'll protect you. She nodded. Then they moved again. Outside, the station pulsed with static warnings. Drones buzzed the far alleys. Somewhere behind them, doors slammed open. Voices barked commands. But ahead, the upper ring waited, along with the last person Arlen knew he could trust. They ran without looking back. Two shadows moving toward the edge of something vast. Not just escape, but beginning. The warning hadn't been subtle, but in Vareth's maw, subtlety was never the point. It was about making you sweat, about letting you know how little time you had left to vanish. Arlen moved with precision, the kind that came from too many years of running. He packed only what mattered, the journal, the archived scrolls, a pulse burner, and 2 rations. Everything else could burn. Mira worked silently beside him. No panic, no flinching, just focused motion, her hands methodically gathering the ceremonial codes and binding them in a narrow scroll wrap. Her calm unsettled him more than any noise would have. They'll come in from below, Arlen said. That stairwell is a bottleneck. We'll have to take the maintenance ducts up through the ventilation shafts to reach the outer ring. Mira looked up from her satchel. You've done this before. Too many times. She didn't ask for more. She zipped the satchel and nodded. They left through the side panel behind the storage shelf. Arlen keyed in the override on the hatch, and it hissed open to reveal a crawl space barely wide enough for their shoulders. Pipes lined the walls, slick with condensation. Every few meters, lights blinked red, a signal from the Maw's deep systems that someone had flagged this route. Their time was shorter than he'd hoped. Keep low, he said. Don't speak unless I tell you. Mira followed without a word. They moved through the vent shafts like shadows, their feet barely scraping the grated floor. Arlen's mind traced the maps he'd memorized, counting junctions, timing patrols. The trader from earlier, whoever he really worked for, wasn't just some curious collector. That voice, that threat, the pins on his coat. Arlen knew the type. Acquisition officers, blacklisted units for black-budget buyers. He hadn't seen those pins in years, not since Lyra. The ducts opened into a wide filtration bay on level 3, a forgotten level, mostly storage and failed prototypes. The air here was hot, dry, filled with the smell of scorched dust. Arlen pulled the grate aside and motioned for Mira to stay close. She did, ducking beside him as they crept through the empty rows of storage vats and broken water purifiers. Then a sound froze them both. Footsteps. Not the random heavy ones of looters or vagrants. These were measured, synchronized, gear-driven, 3, maybe 4. Arlen's hand found Mira's wrist, tightening just enough to make her stop. Her breath caught, but she didn't jerk away. He pointed upward to the next duct. She nodded. They moved, but halfway up the rung, a voice rang out. Stop! It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The calmness carried the real weight. Arlen turned slowly, placing himself between the voice and Mira. 4 men, 2 with rifles, 1 with a thermal lance. And at the center, the officer from before, the one with the pins. Dr. Vine, he said, tilting his head. You should have stayed inside. It would have been easier that way. Arlen stepped forward. You have no jurisdiction here. She's protected under interstellar code. She's flagged under property class 3, the officer interrupted. Unregistered biointellect carrying stolen cultural encryption. That makes her contraband. She's a person. She's a relic with teeth. The buyers don't care what you call her. The officer raised a hand. One of the riflemen stepped forward. Mira's breath quickened. Arlen saw it, her eyes sharpening not with fear but with focus. She recited a full line of high-order breath glyphs, Arlen said. Flawless cadence. If you understood what that means, I understand it means credits. That was it. Arlen moved. He grabbed the pulse burner from his side and fired, low and quick, just enough to blind the front 2 guards with a flash. Mira dropped to her knees, rolled, and disappeared behind a pipe. The rifle shot hissed past Arlen's shoulder, missing by inches. He ducked, fired again, and bolted toward the upper duct. Mira was already there, hand outstretched. He grabbed her wrist, pulled, and they scrambled into the upper chute as a second blast scorched the wall behind them. They didn't stop, not until they were 3 corridors up, breathing hard behind an old oxygen vent. Arlen's hands shook, not from fear, from the certainty that the game had changed. Mira crouched beside him, her forehead damp, tunic torn near the elbow. She was breathing heavily, but her posture hadn't collapsed. She wasn't afraid, she was calculating. You've done that before, she said. Too many times. Mira didn't smile, but something behind her eyes shifted. Recognition, maybe, or something older than trust. You risked your life, she said. Again. I'd do it again. Why? Arlen didn't answer at first. He looked at her, really looked. Hair streaked with sweat, skin flushed with adrenaline, but steady. She didn't tremble. Because I don't want to fail this time, he said. Not again, not with you. She watched him, eyes narrowing slightly. You mean because I carry the rights? No, he said, because you carry yourself, even after everything. They broke so many, but you? They didn't break me, she said, voice low. I know. Silence stretched again. Then Mira reached for the band on her wrist and tore it open. Inside was a sliver of old stone, a breath crystal carved in Thalari spirals. They wanted this, she said. It holds the first glyph. It's not readable unless spoken in sequence. Arlen stared at it, stunned. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know if you would protect me for it or from it. He exhaled. And now? Now I believe you mean what you say. She pressed the crystal into his hand. It was cold, smooth, ancient. I'm not giving it to you, she said. I'm letting you carry it for now. Arlen closed his fingers around the stone, careful not to press too hard. We have to disappear, he said. I know someone, an old contact on the outer moons. She smuggles non-citizens out. But we'll need passage, credits, new identities. Mira nodded. And if they catch us? Then I die first. She looked at him. He met her eyes. For once, neither of them needed to say more. Arlen tucked the crystal inside his vest and stood. Let's go, he said, before they find our trail. They ran into the dark, but not as prey anymore. This time they ran as something else, something shared. And for the first time when Mira reached for his arm, it wasn't for balance, it was for connection. Something unspoken, but undeniable. They hid beneath the freight scaffolds near Dock Ring 12, where the air smelled like hot metal and old Freon. Above them, patrol boots passed in rhythmic intervals, always too close. Mira and Arlen crouched in the shadow of rusted plating, barely breathing. I thought we were clear, Arlen muttered. They're moving faster, Mira said, which means they're afraid. He glanced at her. Afraid of what? She met his eyes. Of me speaking. There was no pride in her voice, no heat, just understanding, the kind that settled into the bones after years of being hunted. He looked away. We're running out of routes. Yulene's contact is waiting at Hangar 9, but we'll never get past the outer checkpoints without a diversion. Mira shifted, her hand brushing against the breath crystal inside her satchel. Then maybe it's time to stop hiding. You mean wait it out? No, she said. I mean, speak. Arlen frowned. You saw what happened last time. The guards pulled back, yes, but barely. If they decide you're dangerous enough, they'll take the shot. Mira was silent for a long moment. Then, if I keep my voice to myself, they still win. Silence is what they made of us, but now I carry more than survival. I carry recognition. She paused. I want them to hear us, not as a threat, not as a relic, as a truth they couldn't kill. Arlen looked at her, the muscles in his jaw tightening. You want to speak in public, with drones watching, with their systems listening. Yes. His instinct said no. Every fiber in him screamed to keep moving, stay small, vanish. But then she reached out, gently, fingertips brushing his. You said you failed once, she whispered. Don't help me survive, help me live. And in that moment, Arlen stopped being a guardian and became her equal. He nodded, then rose. They moved quickly through the side corridors of the upper ring, slipping between food stalls and half-abandoned scrapyards. The central concourse was beginning to stir. Vendors prepping carts, kids chasing each other, hungover smugglers blinking in false daylight. Perfect. Visibility. They climbed onto the remnants of an old trade platform, once used for announcements, now barely standing. Mira stepped to the edge of the metal slab. Arlen stayed behind her, eyes scanning for threats, pulse hammering like a warning bell. Mira inhaled deeply and began to speak. The first words came not as declarations, but as breath. Not the frantic gasps of fear, but the precise, practiced exhalations of sacred rhythm, cadence, silence, pulse. People turned. The melody wove through the noise, gentle, then firm, like wind through old glass. Even the smallest syllables carried weight. Children stopped playing. A vendor paused mid-sale. A man muttered, "What tongue is that?" "Thalari," another answered. Mira continued. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. The words carried themselves, writing memory like sound waves through metal. She began the first remembrance, a rite once only passed from mother to daughter, now given to strangers openly. Arlen watched the crowd, their confusion, their awe. But he also saw movement, corporate patrols approaching from two entrances, visors lit, rifles slung low. He stepped beside her. They're coming. I know, Mira whispered. He drew his pulse pistol, shielding her without hesitation. The first officer barked, "Step down." This is an unauthorized gathering. She's exercising archive speech rights under Interstellar Accord 17A, Arlen called back. She's not listed in any federal registry. She is now, Arlen said, and tapped his datapad. Mira turned, surprised. You scanned my breath line, she asked. Number I memorized it, he replied, and I filed it under Cultural Emergency Codex. You forged it? I honored it. For a heartbeat, she just stared at him, then smiled. A small, fierce thing. Keep speaking, he said. I'll cover you. So she did. Mira's next verse hit harder, not louder but deeper. She recited the echo of extinction, the lament of a people wiped from official memory, meant to be spoken once every 1,000 cycles under starlight. Here, in the middle of this slum, beneath half-dead neon, she reclaimed it. A hush rippled through the crowd. Even the guards hesitated. The last line fell like stone. We are not lost. We are waiting to be heard. Mira stepped down. The air was still. Then came the clapping. Not roaring applause, not yet, but scattered, defiant, undeniable, a vendor, then a mechanic, a child, one by one, until it filled the space with warmth and tension and recognition. The officers didn't fire, not because they didn't want to, because they didn't know how anymore. Retreat, one of them muttered. This is above our clearance, another added. They pulled back. The crowd parted, and Mira turned to Arlen. We changed something, she said. He stepped to her, eyes locked. No, he corrected. You did. She took his hand, this time not to steady herself, but to lead him forward. Together, they walked through the dispersing crowd, not as fugitives, but as something more powerful, carriers of a legacy no longer buried. Arlen squeezed her hand. You ready to leave? Not yet, she said. What's left? She paused, then looked toward the dome ceiling, toward the stars they hadn't seen in days. I want to leave on my feet, not my knees. Arlen smiled, slow and real. Then we go upright. They vanished into the deeper corridors as whispers spread behind them, about the girl who breathed the old world, about the man who walked with her, about a language that refused to die. They stood on the edge of Vareth's maw, beneath the shattered transit dome where stars bled through broken glass. It was the first time Mira had seen them, real stars, not reflections in market windows or simulation glows on crumbling ceilings. Just the vast, dark, and pinpricks of ancient fire, cold and endless and patient. She didn't flinch. Beside her, Arlen adjusted the weight of the satchel across his shoulder. Inside, the handwritten journal, the encoded breath crystal, the archive marker he'd forged from fragments of truth and memory. Everything worth saving was in that bag. But what mattered most stood beside him, alive. Yulene's courier ship waited on the lower pad, a scarred vessel patched together from 20 years of bad history and good escapes. Its engines were warm, its registry false, its jump core hungry for distance. Yulene herself leaned against the cargo ramp, chewing on dried root bark, watching the pair with tired amusement. You've got 10 minutes before the guards recalibrate the grid, she said. After that, I can't promise the cloak will hold. Arlen nodded. We won't need 10. But Mira wasn't looking at the ship. She was staring at the maw, at the rusted walkways, the smoke-stained pillars, the faint outlines of people watching from doorways and corners, still whispering about what they'd seen in the upper ring, about her. She took a breath. I was born here, she said. You don't have to say goodbye, Arlen said gently. I do, she replied, but not to them, to who I was. He waited. She stepped to the edge of the platform, pulled the ribbon from her wrist, the last thing she had from her mother, and tied it around one of the scaffold rails. Tight, deliberate, not to leave it behind, to plant it. She turned to him. You said something once. That memory doesn't survive unless it's carried. He nodded. I think we've carried enough alone, she said. Then she reached for his hand. He took it, not just because she needed it, because he did. They descended the ramp together. The interior of the ship was dim, all soft amber light and recycled air. As the hatch sealed behind them, the noise of the maw vanished. The hum of the engine rose beneath their feet like a living pulse. In the central cabin, Yulene threw them a casual salute. Coordinates are locked when you're ready. Arlen glanced at Mira. Halvar, he said. Still want that moon? She nodded once. You said it had no archives, no records, no power centers, just dirt and sky. She smiled faintly. Good, we'll plant something new. They strapped in. The ship rumbled, lifted, climbed. Below, the maw became a shadow, then a blur, then nothing. Above, the void opened wide, stars expanding into the black like a held breath, finally released. Mira leaned back in her seat. Do you think we'll ever come back? Arlen thought for a long moment. Not as we were. She looked at him, quiet, considering. Then reached into the satchel and pulled out the journal. She set it between them, open to a blank page. Start a new one, she said. He blinked. Now? Yes. Here. He took the pen, stared at the page, then wrote the first line. This is not the end of a culture. He looked at her. It's the beginning of a family. She rested her head on his shoulder. And for the first time since the maw, her breath came soft, slow, easy. Not because she was hiding, but because she was home. The ship jumped, the stars bent, and the language of a long-dead people lived on, in voice, in memory, and in the bond between a man who once ran from his past and a woman who chose to speak again. The sky on Halvar didn't hum like the maw. It breathed. Soft clouds drifted across pale amber light, untouched by neon or smoke. The air smelled of cold grass and something faintly metallic, ozone maybe, or the lingering memory of rain. The wind moved in slow, thoughtful waves. There was space between each sound, no walls, no watchers, no echo of boots on metal grates. Arlen stood at the edge of the ridge, overlooking a sloping valley of mossy green and ochre fields. Below, a small homestead shimmered in the morning light. One dome shelter, a solar array, a few irrigation spires. He hadn't known how heavy silence could be until it wasn't forced. Behind him, footsteps crunched softly over the soil. Mira's hand slipped into his, cool at first, then warm. She rested her head lightly against his arm, her long red hair brushed by wind, loose now, no longer hidden beneath a hood. They had slept on real bedding. They had woken to birds instead of sirens. And for the first time in either of their lives, there had been no need to listen for danger in the dark. This is what air is supposed to feel like, Mira whispered. Arlen smiled faintly. Heavy with promise? She tilted her head up to him. Heavy with choice. He turned slowly. The wind caught a lock of her hair and carried it across her cheek. He reached out and tucked it behind her ear, fingers brushing her skin. She didn't flinch. Instead, she closed her eyes for a heartbeat, leaned into his touch, just barely, and exhaled through her nose. A breath like memory, a breath like home. I keep thinking, she murmured, that someone's going to come take it back. Like all this isn't real yet. He traced the edge of her jaw with the back of his hand. It's real, because you chose it. We both did. And you? She asked. You're not running anymore? No, he said. I stopped the moment you looked me in the eye and said my name like it mattered. Her smile broke slowly across her face. Not like light, like warmth after frost. Say it again, she whispered. He did. Mira. Her breath caught, so slight, so fragile, and she leaned closer, her forehead resting against his. They stood like that for a long, suspended moment. I don't know how to do this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Me neither, he said. But I want to learn, with you. She nodded against him, and then her lips found his. It wasn't dramatic. There was no firestorm behind it, no orchestral swell, just the firm, certain press of someone who had waited a long time to feel safe enough to want. He kissed her back with equal care. His hands didn't pull or press. They simply held, one at her waist, one at her cheek, anchored, present, chosen. When they finally parted, she didn't move away. Her eyes stayed closed, her face still near his. I love you, she said, the words trembling with truth. Not out of need, not out of relief, but because nothing else needed to be said anymore. His voice was quiet when it came. I love you too. They didn't need to say it again. It was already written. Into the earth beneath them, into the breath they now shared, into every heartbeat that came without fear. Below, the wind stirred the fields. And above, for the first time in either of their lives, the stars waited in silence, not as a threat, but as a witness.